Hey everyone, today I want to talk about the LFO on the OP-Z, and that's one of the parameter pages. I'm going to discuss what an LFO is in very, very simple terms. I'm going to talk about where they're located on the OP-Z, and then I'm going to talk about what each encoder does and what the values mean. So if you're already familiar with the OP-Z and already familiar with LFOs, skip to the reference part. Otherwise, let's talk about what an LFO is. So an LFO is basically a way of assigning one of these knobs to be automatically turned by the OP-Z. So let's say I've got this filter knob here. It changes the sound as I move the encoder. And I can record these changes onto the OP-Z if I want, or I could get the OP-Z to automatically do it for me by using the LFO. The LFO, let me just do a quick example here. Let's go to the LFO and let's put it on a relatively fast speed, put it to the filter, and I'm going to make it pretty dramatic. So it's like I'm now getting somebody else to control the LFO for me. And I can control how much they're changing it, how fast that change is happening, like how fast it's doing a full cycle or loop, what's being changed, and I can change like the shape of it. So is it just going to random values? Is it smooth? Whatever. So I can change all of that on the destination parameters, which we'll talk about later. Where do you actually find the LFOs? So the first 8 tracks, all of them except for the ARP track, have their LFO on parameter page 3. So if I go to a track, I can hit shift until I see this 3 light up. Then I know that I'm on the LFO page. And that's the case for tracks 1 through 6 and 8. There's also an LFO on the I/O track, or the module track, which is track 14 over here. That's also on page 3. FX 1 and 2 have their LFOs on page 2. And they all work the same and have the same encoders and same values and same basic concepts. So let's talk about what those values and concepts actually are. So I'm going to go back to the lead track, and I'm going to navigate to the LFO. This light is awesome. This light tells me what the LFO is currently doing. It represents visually how fast it's going, the shape of it. It doesn't show us the destination or the depth, but it's at least a pretty good starting point. So again, this is the amount of modulation, or the depth of it. This is the speed, the destination, and then the shape. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can hear the filters being basically turned down here. If I change this depth, I can get to this green light in the middle, and that's no depth. Previously, we were at the most negative amount, which means that filter is being turned down and up. Now we're going to go to the highest amount, which I think means the filter will be turned up and down, but I don't know if we'll be able to hear it. Oh, we can definitely hear it. And I can make that more and more subtle if I want. I can adjust the speed. With this second knob, or with the second encoder, if I turn it all the way counterclockwise, I'll end up at 1. Whenever a number is highlighted on the second knob, it means it's tempo synced. And so it starts with 1/64th of the tempo, 32nd, 16th, 8th, 4th. These two are probably the most important to me because it's what I'm most likely to use personally. We have it right here as a half measure, or a half note, whole note or a whole measure or bar, and then finally 2 bars. You can keep turning this clockwise though, and it's just going to gradually get brighter, and now it's still changing the tempo, or changing the rate, except it's not synced to the tempo anymore. Okay, so we've covered the depth and the speed. Let's move on to destinations. So destination, there are 8 of them. 8, there we go. And they are the same as the first parameter page. So I'm going to hit shift twice just to bring up that parameter page, just to show you what I'm talking about. The first 4 are parameter 1, which affects whatever synth or sampler engine is in the OP-Z. Parameter 2, which is the same. It syncs parameter 2 of whatever engine or sampler or synth engine. Here's the filter cutoff, and then the filter resonance. And that's the case for all of these tracks that have an LFO. Those first 4 are always the same. The second 4 are always the same too, but I think the first 4 are just a bit easier to remember because it's that first page. Hit shift twice more to return to that LFO. So we have, so for our destination, we have P1, P2, filter cutoff, filter resonance. 5 is the attack of the node. And I'm assuming that you know how envelopes work, and I'll just clarify that it is the attack on the synths, which is the first parameter on the envelope page, which is page 2. On the drums, it is actually going to be the second parameter on parameter page 2, because the first parameter for drum tracks is the start of the sample, and it specifically affects the attack, not the start. So we've got first 4, we've got start. This is pitch. Pretty awful. I mean, it's got plenty of applications. I just think it's kind of funny hearing a weird, crusty siren. Okay, 7 is panning. Then 8 is volume. Okay, so we've covered all 3 of these. Let's talk about the different shapes. So the shapes will just affect what this light looks like. And I think that right now the easiest contrast is to show you the difference between 1 and 3. 1 is going to be a sine wave, and 3 is square. So a sine wave is going to be a gentle change, and square is just going to go from one extreme to the other. So it's kind of flashing here instead of having that gradual change. Okay, so let's talk about what these actually are. There are 12 of them, but thankfully a lot of them repeat. 1 is a sine wave. 2 is a triangle wave, which is sharper, I guess. 3 is a sawtooth wave, which is, you'll see, 3 is a square wave, which is... Let's actually start over. So here we go. So it's gradually turning it up and down. Similarly, gradually turning it up and down, turning it on and off here. The 4th one is going to be a sawtooth. So it's going to increase and then just kind of cut off and then immediately start increasing again. Or sorry, increase, drop down, increase again. And you can see the light reflecting that too. 5 is random. And I believe it's just random within the depth that you pick. 6 is going to be the gyroscope. And this is pretty fun because you can... The way that you tilt it is going to adjust how bright the light is. There's a lot of neat applications for that, but probably for another time. I may have already talked about it in another video. I've already lost track. Anyway, so we've now discussed the first 6. The second 6 are very similar. Except when you go clockwise enough, you'll notice this 0 turns on. And that means that the LFO is going to restart every time I press a trigger. Because if you watch this, it's just doing this gentle pattern. And once it gets really bright, I'm going to restart it by pressing a note down. It was free before, which means that when I press a note, it doesn't affect where the LFO is at. It just applies it like normal. Anytime there's a 0 on this shape, it means that it's going to restart it. 1 is a bell instead of a sine, but I think those are very similar. Maybe the start point's different though. 2 is a triangle again, square, saw, random, and then this is an envelope, so it only happens once, so that you don't see this lighting up until I press a note. Then you'll see it apply just like an envelope. And it doesn't come back. It only does it once each time that the trigger's pressed. Okay, so that was a lot, and I'm a little bit worried because I think I got more information in this one than in the past videos, the past takes of this video, but I see that I am much earlier on time. So I hope I went at a speed that was understandable, and I hope I didn't skip anything big. If I did, please let me know in the comments, and hopefully this helps. Thank you for watching.